It means maybe connecting with people that you don't normally connect with, sit next to somebody on a park bench, or just, call your mum. Connecting. So loneliness, we know, especially through COVID, but actually before that, there was a lot of work happening on loneliness to do with aging and how people who were around other people aged better. They were less unwell.
Pretty lonely business doing stuff about climate change, I reckon. And a lot of the stuff that we're told to do about it is about do things in your life. Do things as a consumer. Recycle better. You individual. Do stuff better as an individual. But we all kind of know that individual actions aren't really the only thing we need to do. And the same in our lives, right? So much of the solutions we're given is to do stuff by ourselves. Then we'll be better, we'll be more content. But our brains, or do they, need more than that? What do we know about the human needs to connect to others? This is Your Brain on Climate. I'm Dave and I've been campaigning and talking about climate change for the best part of 2 decades now. And there's so much I still don't know about one of the most important causes of it all, human brains and how they work. Your Brain on Climate is a podcast about psychology, what it can teach us about climate change, how we got it, and what we might do about it. And yes, I've got a cold. Well, joining me this week is Alison Crowther. Alison's a coach, a speaker, and a trainer in the fields of conflict resolution, and she's done a huge amount of policy about public engagement, in particular how to engage the public on complex issues. She works on getting deeper connection and collaboration to others, and that's what we ended up talking about. I thought at first we were going to talk about her work in positive psychology, a term that, as you'll hear, I got wrong. We did talk about that, and I kept coming back to it, but what kept coming out was connection, resilience, and how to get that, both in science and in nature, but in our personal lives. It's a fascinating chat. Absolutely fascinating. It's the happy return of the owl noise this week. So if you hear this noise, it denotes wisdom. It means in the show notes there's something that explains a thing we've just been talking about. So you don't need to worry about it if you don't immediately understand it. It does crop up in a few places in this chat. So we started by me blundering in with my size, 8's, tiny little feet. Anyway, we started with me blundering in about positive psychology, Alison's field, and basically admitting that I'd got it all wrong.
Your brain on climate.
We had a bit of backwards and forwards in the run-up to this episode where I said, hey, Alison, come and talk about positive psychology. And you said, what? And I said, here's a load of questions. You were like, no. Wait a minute. Shut up and listen. You got it wrong. So what does positive psychology and positivity mean?
I think the word positivity is quite... it's quite problematic nowadays. This idea of positive thinking, of wishing your life into being. Apparently, right now on TikTok and everything, that's happening quite a lot. And that has never really worked. It doesn't, unless it's backed up by something like meaning, then it's not actually going to work. And it's a bit of snake oil. So sadly, the word positivity has been embroiled in all of that stuff. So much so that, even The Guardian is really down on positive psychology, which is a sadness because actually positive psychology is really great. Unfortunately, Martin Seligman, who was what we call the grandfather of positive psychology, didn't really think about that when he came up with the term. He merely came up with the term positive to denote against the negative or pathological psychology, which was going on in the 60s, which was 100% of what was going on in the 60s. Everybody was studying the isms or the ENIAs, schizophrenia, depression, everything that was wrong and bad, lots of mental illnesses, thinking that, that was the thing to study. And he wondered, what would happen if we studied the 80% of people who at any one time are well? What does that tell us? And so that's where he came up with the word positive as opposed to the pathological. So he didn't mean being unremittingly positive. He just meant not not the pathological. But of course, once you have a name, it sticks, and it has taken on something else. It doesn't mean that. It has never meant that. And
when you describe positive psychology, and you're a positive psychologist, and people, it's not, oh, you are wonderful, and if you think you're wonderful, you will achieve, you will succeed, you will win X Factor and play for Manchester City and everything will be fine. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about like, no. We're just looking at the stuff that makes you happy and the stuff that makes us well. And that is what positive psychology is, yes?
It doesn't even make you happy. It makes you perhaps content. It makes you able to live life, from perhaps not really being able to live life. It allows you not to dip into depression. If you keep hold of, there are 5 tenets of it, really. In the UK, we've come up with 5. We like 5 in the UK. 5 fingers on the hand, 5 food groups. The NHS asked an organisation to come up with 5, and I can tell you about those later. They were, they're great. That's what they've come up with. But another thing about positivity is something that has come up really quite recently. They're calling it toxic positivity. So that's this point where somebody says, hey, you got this. Have you heard that? People are saying, you got this.
You got this. You can run across them alligators. You got this.
It doesn't mean anything. It means, so Brené Brown recently did a podcast with Susan David, and they came up with this, and she called it the tyranny of positivity. And it's basically saying my comfort is more important than your reality. So if I say I'm having a really hard time with my son, this is not happening, that's not happening. Somebody's saying, oh, you got this, you're an amazing mum. On to the next thing.
That means shut up and leave me alone is what that means.
It means shut up and leave me alone.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful. But because it's really become a bit of a mantra, a bit of a, hey, let's all be up. People just think that they can do that, and it's not true, actually. So what that leaves me feeling with is, oh no, there's another person that can't help me, or doesn't want to help me, or is bored by my situation, or whatever. And then, if I'm feeling slightly depressed, I might then go in on myself and then not ask for any help and get smaller and smaller and get this problem getting worse and worse and worse. And that is what is called toxic positivity. So we don't really like that very much.
So it's not, this is really important. So proper positive thinking, that sounds crap, but proper positive psychology is actually the opposite of going, you got this, and going off and making a cup of tea. It's actually saying, how can we help people to feel better and more content? What are the things that we do?
Yes.
For ourselves and for others. Yes. That's the distinction, right? And certainly not these mantras of success.
Absolutely not the mantras. Now, it has to be said that sometimes these mantras work. They really do. So things like grounding. As a facilitator of conflict, I have a certain number of things that I will do in my brain. I won't tell anybody that I'm doing them, but I will be doing them to make sure that I am in a state where I can present myself to a group that's in conflict. So those are things, they're like mind tricks. That's like a form of meditation, forms of breathing, that kind of thing, grounding. That is a mental state that I need to get into to be the best professional I can be, or the best mum I can be, actually. It's very much the same with a child who's having a meltdown to a group of adults who are basically internally having a meltdown. It's very similar. And I need to be in a good state to be able to do that. And by me having a cleanliness about my own well-being, that will help that situation. It means I have less work to do each time.
Even then, if you're not saying to yourself, oh, come on, Alison, you've got to do this and it's fine. You're saying, no, they're saying there are some things I have to do, like I have to do a bit of work here.
Yeah.
Right? I have to slow my breathing down and think about the things I want to think about and invest. So it takes work then. That's what we're drawing from this. Positive psychology is a thing that you work at.
Yes.
Being positive, and that requires work.
Yeah. That we have learned some stuff. Often it could be communally, from war, from stories that have come from war that are not helpful, but trigger us now in today's society. That we could have learned something early in our own life that affects us as a trauma and triggers us later in life as well. I mean, frankly, we are a whole bag of tiny traumas. All of us are a whole bag of tiny traumas. And when it comes to climate change, if you think about it, a boat on water. So when we're happy and when things are well, our river is really high. It's great. We're in our little boat. We're bobbing along. We can't even see any rocks. It's brilliant. Our resilience is high. When our resilience is low, if we're ill, if things are going on in the world over which we have no domain, there's nothing we can do about it. So Afghanistan may be affecting people like that. Climate change is affecting people like that. COVID certainly affected people like that. Then the water is lower, and it'll be different. It'll affect different people in different ways. But as the water gets lower, so the traumas of the past start sticking up out of the water, and our little boat bumps into them. So that's a way of thinking about it. So if we can keep our resilience high, which is effectively what positive psychology does, then we are not going to bump into all of those other little bits of trauma that are under there.
So I guess the reason we're talking about this, or at least I think the reason we're talking about this, is because if what we want to be is well and happy, and all of the things that positive psychology is about, positivity sounds like it's about, you can't do that unless you are looking at the things that are under the surface there, right? Sticking spears into the bottom of your boat, your traumas, right? Is that right? Or
you don't really need to do the looking at them all if your resilience is high enough.
Right.
So making that water high is good enough. And in the UK, we've come up with something. We were asked to come up with it by the NHS. I say we, it's Happy City, which is now called, I think, Thriving Places. And they came up with a mnemonic of 5, which is clang, which is quite the clang of happiness. And that's
clang.
Connect. And of these, C, frankly, if you stop at C, if C works for you, brilliant. C is connect. So that means talking to people. It means maybe connecting with people that you don't normally connect with, sit next to somebody on a park bench, or just, call your mum. Connecting. So loneliness, we know, especially through COVID, but actually before that, there was a lot of work happening on loneliness to do with aging and how people who were around other people aged better. They were less unwell. How people with televisions also were happier because they saw a human face. So we're really hardwired as babies to look at a face, and we make faces. All of us make faces out of everything. I think there are some really amusing Facebook groups where you've got a house that looks like a face, or an elastic band that's fallen on the ground that looks like a face, and they take faces, and that's absolutely, we are hardwired for that. So old people having faces and people talking on the television screen actually does that keep them in some way connected. You may say that that's slightly hollow, but actually it works. You can tell that by testing their blood. It really works. It's producing some kinds of hormones that are helpful. So that's not so bad at all.
What's the lang?
Clang. We've got learn. So keep on learning, lifelong learning. Absolutely brilliant for us.
Continuous personal growth.
Absolutely, yes. We've got active, be active. So exercise. And if anybody's had depression, they'll know that one of the first things they ask you to do, or the first things that they will prescribe for you in social prescribing, is a gym membership. Not necessarily to go to the gym and be by yourself doing weights, but the more communal activities. And sometimes it will be a group of people who, have a personal coach, maybe 5 people having a personal coach and just learning how to move. And that's brilliant, again, because if that's a group of people, then they're also doing connect. So the more of these things you can do at once, then the better it is. It's brilliant. Dancing is a particularly good one because you're doing learn, active, noticing everybody else's
my
dress.
least favourite thing in the world. Do I have to do that?
I mean, dancing is amazing, really, because it's that connection. It's the connection with the brain and the learning. I do samba dancing myself badly, I have to say, but I love it. And it is all of those things. It works. It's great. It's community. We go to festivals where lots of stuff, and it's performing as well, which is always fun. And kind of give. In fact, it's all of them. It's give, because we volunteer to do these things.
Right.
So it's the
G is give. What was that?
Yeah. Notice.
Right.
So notice it's a bit like the Buddhist be present, So noticing, you just notice, and it's a bit like gratitude as well. If you've heard about the gratitude diary, gratitude may fit in with this. What people do, and this is one of those things that positivity, where people don't like positivity, they go, oh no, not that stuff, making out that you're actually doing okay when you're not really doing okay. It's not okay. And it's true. So if somebody's getting you to write down all your problems and then on the back, write down what you're grateful for, that is not actually helping. That is kind of on the way to the toxic positivity. That's kind of negating your bad feelings. What you need to do is actually look at and sit with those so-called negative feelings. Because what is anger? Anger is a rocket to action. Anger is brilliant. And also anger is a really massive word. When my little boy says he's angry, which is a word obviously that he's learned at nursery and a word that people use to him, I say, but what are you really? What is it? Is it frustrated? And we need a lot more vocabulary around that. Is it frustrated? Is it sad? Sad's another big one. What is it exactly? And then if we can tease that apart, then we'll find that one person said one thing that wasn't very nice. When you actually get down to it, he's angry because of something tiny. It's not always obviously tiny. I'm angry because of climate change, but it doesn't eat me up. So notice, is about all that noticing. What is that about? What is that heartbeat? What is that bad dream that I've just had? What's it telling me? And then, living with it, not negating it. Let's talk about climate change as an example, climate change. And generally, all of these answers will thankfully come back to Clang. So again, the learning, we feel absolutely out of our depth because we don't know enough and we don't know what to do. So what do I do? There is so much information. It seems very pressured. I seem to need to do it now. Now, sadly, there was a time when we wouldn't have been pressured into doing this. We knew about this sort of stuff, beginning with Silent Spring in 1968, 1969. Work was being done on biodiversity collapse. That Silent Spring was the spring in where there was a problem with the water in the US and all the birds died. And a woman realized that there were no birds. So wrote about that, Rachel Carson, exactly. And so she wrote about that and traced it back to the water and wrote this book. And since then, there have been many alarms, many alarms. And yet, especially Western societies have not heard that. And it could be, it really probably is, because especially, say, in the UK, we're used to leading and winning. We live in a very safe, physically a very safe place. We don't have earthquakes, tsunamis. We don't have volcanoes. We don't have any of that stuff. We are not, the islanders that live here, we are not scared of anything. We don't even have lions or tigers or anything that's going to kill us, not even any insects that are going to kill us, in a way that even Australia has little red, lots of snakes and so on. So life is safe. And even our politicians have generally been safe to us. They have been safe. It's, generally we seem to, if we believe our own stuff, lead in this stuff. Now, I know that there's a whole history of colonialism, but I'm saying what this society believes about itself And it does rather believe that it's great, and that we lead and that it will all be solved, because it has always been solved. And the films, I have to say, the films always tell us that it ends nicely, doesn't it? Perhaps apart from horror movies, which are more of a joke.
I mean, there's so much in our culture. I mean, not just in the UK, but in kind of, broadly Western culture, which is what I'm familiar with, I guess. The stories are that everything is all right in the end. And often that the people who deserve to win will win.
Yes.
Usually. But some of it comes pretty close to your toxic, positive psychology, right?
Yes.
Which is like, all that needs to happen is the good guy needs to have enough time to be the good guy, and then he'll win or she'll win. And, job done. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
And it tends to be a hero's story, because we like one hero, or increasingly, thankfully, heroine, but mainly hero's story. We like that one person, don't we? Because they have the backstory, they have the wife and kids, or whatever, the tragedy, something they've built on. And we like that story. This is not that story. We make people into that story. David Attenborough, Greta. We want the lone wolf idea.
Captain Tom.
Yes. But that is not the way it's going to go. It's actually the opposite, and it's the G of Clang. It's community. It's give. It's share. That stuff, that's going to happen. It is beginning to happen. People are realizing, our children realize, I say our children, even people from my age downwards, for people from my age who have certainly been working in the charity sector, we don't have enough pension to live on. We need to be very creative about our pensions, and we will be living together in communities of like-minded people. We will be making sure that we are really well working the land, that our food is non-toxic, that, we will know this. This will be known generally in a way that it isn't yet. Some of us have known that for a while. Generally, that will come up now. From now on, I think kindness is going to get a lot more
or at the
prevalent.
Start of the pandemic, right? I mean, at least for a while there, when we were all smacking saucepans around out the window and being nice to each other, it felt like, I allowed myself to think for 5 seconds that maybe this was the true nature of society coming out. Maybe we weren't all gits to each other, and it was lovely. It felt as if we were remembering collectively what was important and connecting, even amongst the horrible death toll and fear.
And I think you're right, I have to say. Fundamentally, I think you're right. I've worked now with people all over the world in situations of conflict and difficulty, and generally they are lovely. And it doesn't matter what they read. And I sit with people. I've been very privileged to not have to be the facilitator, but to be a kind of a mentor in these spaces. So I get to sort of wander around, check things out, make sure things are going okay, and talk to every different type of person in that room, from the scientist to the specialist to the policymakers and the public. And I sit down with them and I say, so, what do you think about this? Then you're hearing about climate change, you're hearing about space weather and some really scary stuff, because policy making is actually quite scary. You hear a lot. You have to know what the worst case scenario is, and we share that with the public when we're doing this work. And they absolutely love hearing the science and are totally able to deal with the inconsistencies and with the uncertainties. And I think that's a really major problem that our governments have had. They've thought, the public can't deal with uncertainty. That is not true. If you give them really good understanding, really good, I'd say evidence, but it doesn't need to be evidence in the sort of, we've studied this for 20 years and therefore we've come to this solution, but sort of hey, we've just found out that. Hey, we've just found out that. And the limits of our certainty around it are, people can deal with that. They really can deal with that sort of information. And I think that would be vastly helped if people like Radio 4 and just radio generally, broadcast news and the media could start doing really simple, not just infographics, but certainly infographics, really simple programs about how things could be, about the future, about a positive vision, not just how awful everything is, but what we need to do. Because the second question is, and what do I need to do? So flooding, for example, I did some work with the Environment Agency, and the two things that people wanted to know was what's going to happen what can I do? And it was always, yes, but what can I do? And they wanted to know that. And they weren't there to talk about a specific incident or their specific houses. But of course, that's when you learn this data, of course, that's what you want to know. And there wasn't really enough help there. So just really being clear, what can you do? And also, what are we doing?
Your brain on climate.
The way that climate change is explained to us can make me certainly feel quite helpless, because it can seem so vast, and because it doesn't matter really. We all know it doesn't matter really what I as an individual do if nobody else doesn't. I think that's one of the paradoxes, right? It only matters if we collectively do something. But yet so much of the solutions that we are given are about things I should do. I should not rinse my plate before I put it in the dishwasher. I should recycle, do all this sort of stuff, right? And running through everything you've been saying is this idea that things we should do together, we can do together, are not only going to increase our resilience, but also are the answer to an extent, because they are collective things to do. Yeah. Which make us more...
Well, they are individual things that we all do together at the same time.
Right, yeah.
And when you do it collectively, it is so much more fun and ruder and more... Yeah. It's just more joyful. It gives you more joy and happiness. It gives you connection. It gives you all of those things that I was talking about.
We're recording this as Extinction Rebellion are currently in the centre of London doing, end of August, doing... I was going to go down there today, but I couldn't for, complex reasons, because I had to come talk to you mostly.
I'm sorry.
But I was watching some of the videos on Instagram and just thinking, God, that looks joyous. Joyous was the word. It just looked fun. It looked like people getting together to talk about the death of everything. That's bad. But in a communal, celebratory, joyous kind of way. Yeah. Which I presume is kind of pretty core to positivity.
It is. Joy. Absolutely. Joy is core to it, but it's not a requirement. It's what happens when you do those other things. And I think what's really lovely is that they're doing that number one thing, aren't they, of connection. They're doing it together. Whatever the thing is that they're doing together, they're doing it together. And that's going to make you happier, feel supported, feel that you're doing something with people. So that negates what you've just said about me, myself. You suddenly see all of these people doing it. And it's not me, myself at all. It's all of these people. And I have to say, if you talk to those individual people, they are lawyers and surgeons and nurses and professors and all sorts of people. This is not the great unwashed. This is not hippies out there. This is everybody.
And some hippies.
And hippies. Yeah, that is true. It is literally everybody. And it has been like that for a long time on the campaign trail, but now it's so much wider. And people are taking, a month leave, 2 months leave off their serious jobs as teachers, to go and do this stuff because it matters, because we literally have to save the world. But I can do that and I have a smile on my face. Why? Because we're doing it together. And there is hope. There is something called stubborn optimism, which is where you really deeply know how bad it is. And the IPCC report is bad. The new one that's coming out, which has been leaked, is even worse. Think about basically scientists screaming from a page, screaming at politicians to say, do this now. Yeah, it's clear.
This next report is about, because the first report was about the science and this one's about what should be done about it. It's the one you're talking about. Yeah. And what should be done about it is a great deal more than is happening.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Right. Absolutely. And it's not all, this is what always makes me feel happy, is that I've worked in this thing called policy, and I've always thought, not always thought, but initially when I worked in this thing called policy, I was thinking government. And then as I worked with stakeholders, I saw people taking this policy, this knowledge back to their own workplaces and just doing it. It didn't matter if that policy came in. They had heard from the public, they had heard from all the other specialists, they had read the runes and gone back and made that change anyway. And in fact, many, many, many companies have done that. In a way, government is lagging behind.
So it sounds like, and I know that this is not a word you're allowed to use, but it sounds like you're hopeful for the future. Am I allowed to use that word? I'm using that word. And optimistic to an extent, because you see that some of the responses to climate change are going to be about, bringing people together, connection, learning, noticing what's happening, all the stuff we're going to be talking about. So how do you think people who are working on climate change, when it can all, feel a bit much, or people who are worried about the state of the climate, how can we hold on to that hope and optimism and positivity in our daily going about of things? Because we need to.
Okay, so this is Brené Brown's area. It's the vulnerability. They call it rolling with the vulnerability. We are vulnerable because we care so much. There is so much meaning. And I have to say that in work on optimism, it is understood, and I'm sorry to say this, that people with meaning in their lives will be unhappier than those without. Sadly. It just is.
Why is that?
Unhappier in a kind of there are two senses of the word happiness. So there's eudaimonia, which is this, it's on your sofa. It is the deep love that you have for family. It's relaxing. It's comfort. I mean, not ostentatious comfort, but it's not discomfort. It's that deep love, contentment, satisfaction, that eudaimonia happiness, a security. And then there's the other, which is, I think when people hear the term happy, they think it means this, and it's like almost hedonism. It's the big wheel ride. It's the screaming joy. It's the, all that kind of stuff. It's the thrill seeking. Now, for some people, that is their normal set point of happiness because they kind of need, perhaps they were born with that kind of necessary thing to go and do thrill seeking. That makes them feel great. Like performers need to perform. Writers need to write. We're all different, thank goodness, because we all need those different skills, especially, coming into this uncertain future. And the one with meaning is the eudaimonia. It's not vastly different, but it does mean that we are not as sort of as spontaneously happy as those other guys, because we do carry that weight of responsibility. But that also allows us to sleep at night, because we seek out that connection, and we do need to be, taken out for drinks. We need other people who have that other thing to help us.
It can get lonely, can't it?
It can. And we need to help each other to do that. And there are some friends. I've got a friend who used to work very much in climate, and she now works as a clown and in care homes with the elderly. And sometimes we need a really massive break from that stuff. So she was somebody who used to attend the COPs.
International Climate Talks, right?
Yeah. So sometimes we need a real break. If we've done a lot of that stuff, we need to make sure we don't burn out as well. We need to look after each other.
Self-care, the kind of individual level. So, this is a tough thing to be thinking about all the time, or even just to be getting your head around.
Yeah.
But actually the solutions, in as much as we can use that word for climate change, are also found in that connection, working with other people, coming together, being joyous, and not sparing the weight of it all altogether. It sounds like if we're taking one thing out of this, is that at the root of a positive approach to climate change is connection, both in your daily life, but also in terms of what you might do about it. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
Crikey, I mean, that conversation didn't go where I originally thought it was going to go. I thought we'd be talking about, like I said, positive psychology, and I went on a bit of a journey of understanding that positivity in a psychological sense is used not to denote all happy, smiley, happy, joy, but kind of resilience. And by heck, we need a lot of resilience when thinking about climate change. And I love there's something for me so central in this idea of connection, doing stuff together. It comes back to Rebecca Solnit has written about this in her book Hope in the Dark, which I recommend for anyone thinking about this stuff. You know, that doing things with other people, the act of just doing something, but the process of doing can be as uplifting as anything else, right? So much of climate change and so much of what we do about it is kind of sold to us as these isolated individual things. And obviously, bloody obviously, that can get a little bit, lonely and make you feel like it's not adding up to much. What's that Sean Locke line? Here's me washing out my Marmite pot before I recycle it. But, on the other hand, China is building 2 new coal power stations this week. So I love the idea of the joy building resilience and that guiding force in kind of taking action, doing something not alone but with other people, doing stuff collectively in all its senses, doing stuff in your community, having conversations with people, connecting. I love the idea that can give away not just to actually make a genuine difference, because the ripple effect and the solidarity, for want of a better word, and the just niceness of the whole bloody thing is half the point. This is where you get the strength to carry on. But it's what makes people want to carry on. And carrying on is the only way we carry on. Does that make any sense? And I think what I love most of all about it is that the thing we need as people, the things our brains need to be resilient, to connect to others, to learn, to notice what's going on, all of them things in the clang. I've forgotten some of the clang now. These are the same things we might need to build communities doing something about climate change and to take actions that are actually changing what's happening. I love that. It's kind of what this podcast is all about. So thank you very much for listening to another episode of Your Brain on Climate. We're getting near the end of the first series. We've got one more episode in season? What do they say? Season 1. It's an absolute corker. It's coming up next week. It's with someone I never thought I'd get, and I've got them. And I'm very, very excited about it. So listen out for that. Until then, please let me know what you thought of this show. You can find me on Twitter @BrainClimate, or drop me an email to hello@yourbrainonclimate.com. Thank you so much to Alison for coming on here and chatting to me. You can find out more about Alison and her work at Made to Last Resilience. Just put that into your Google and have a little search. And yeah, I do recommend finding out more about what she's up to. Very interesting work, very interesting person. Thank you so much again, Alison. Please, if you like this show, drop it a review. Go to your podcast medium of choice, give it 5 stars. Go on, you want to, but leave a review as well with your hands, because that shows real people are listening and not just sinister bots. It makes such a massive difference. If you've enjoyed this, also tell a friend, tweet about it. Do whatever you do to get this out there. I need to get the word out. It's getting out. People are listening. Listening numbers are going up. It's very exciting. Could always do with more, though. Right, that's it. So until next week, until the last episode of season 1, thank you so much for listening. Find someone to connect with. Give them a cuddle if that's allowed. If that's not allowed, don't do that, but connect with them in some other way, spiritually, mentally, or just by being nice to them in their general kind of vicinity. You know what to do. Get on with it. Bye.